sometimes the people with the least power find the biggest voices. The School Strike for Climate, also understood as SS4C, is one of the clearest examples of strategic communication in today's modern climate. It started with Greta Thunberg as a lone school strike in 2018, and within months, that sign had turned into millions of people worldwide demanding climate action. In Australia, School Strike for Climate made headlines when 350,000 people walked out for the September 2019 global strike. I was one of those people, and their message was blunt. We're striking because our politicians are failing to protect us from the climate crisis. This perfectly shows what Zerfras meant by strategic communications is purposeful, goal-oriented, and intentional. But we need to remember, no powerful message is simple. School Strike for Climate's strategy comes with some real ethical dilemmas. First, the faces are young. Teenagers are powerful messengers, which is great, but they also carry the cost, right? They carry online harassment, burnout, stress, and potentially even missed education. And this is echoing what Becker's states in the idea of social hierarchy of credibility. Normally, kids don't set the news agenda, but these kids do, which is really powerful, but by risking their comfort. We have a digital risk. When COVID-19 hit, SS4C pivoted to hashtags and live stream, and hashtag climate strike online started trending worldwide. You know, as Greta said, keep your voices heard online. But this is showing what Badham points out, that in many digital arenas, meaning is co-created. But there is the concern that this can be hijacked or twisted. So we're raising the really hard question here. How do you protect truth when you don't fully control the message? I'm gonna shift a little bit from ethics for a moment and have a look at some of the other strategies that School Strike for Climate was adopting. First of all, Volkshausen says that communications works best when we consider these three levels, that when the macro context, we have a meso strategy and micro action, and they're all lining up. For School Strike for Climate, we have the climate crisis, that's in the macro level, and that's, you know, a global threat that is demanding urgent action. We also have the meso level, so the organizing structure, so students planning local strikes, partnerships, alliances with schools, media, and here we can kind of see Van Riel's mirror function, that SS4C are constantly scanning the news for the right moments to strike and to have their voices heard. And then we've got the micro level, and that's the tactic. So that's on the ground. We've got the kids with signs, the walkouts, the hashtags, and more of kind of a relevant example of this in Australia was during the March 2022 strike. School Strike for Climate really championed there is no climate justice without First Nations justice. Moving on, Habermas calls the public sphere the place where society debates big issues. And Hall and Scheslinger remind us that access is hierarchical. We need to understand that powerful institutions are primary definers, so corporations and governments, and they have the most routine access. School Strike for Climate, where they come into this, is that they're actually challenging this notion. They're using what Wasteboard calls drama and event-based news. So these are those massive strikes that are really forcing coverage. So according to Wasteboard, NGOs aim to influence policy. They set agendas, build networks, and that's exactly what SS4C is doing. However, Powers warns us that to get that coverage, sometimes NGOs have to adapt their news and their approach to make them less radical and to make that more appealing to the media. In this example, School Strike for Climate is using children, and that's getting it into the media. but it's also reducing the message around climate change, and some of those more polarizing and gut-wrenching facts aren't being so much put at the forefront, and they're using a slightly more digestible and relatable approach with the children. So I guess what we can learn from this is that the ultimate power is still sitting with those primary definers. The Terrace test by Becker and Martinson, in comparing the School Strike for Climate's approach, we can see that they are ticking all 5 boxes. So they are truthful, which looks like citing climate science and using reliable sources and evidence. They're authentic, so again we have young voices, grassroots, local communities sharing their story. It's not pretending to be something that it's not. It's respectful. There's a large consideration in this communication strategy for the intersectionality within climate change. An example of this looking like uplifting First Nation voices. It's equitable, so it actually makes really complex climate issues a lot more tangible and accessible at lots of different entry points. One example of this would be a chant that a lot of people have the ability to understand and access. Obviously, within reason, we do also have to think about the complexities of that and what that looks like for people who don't have internet access or have other barriers to entry. And finally, it's socially responsible. Those local actions are creating global impact, and we have here the essence of Becker's enlightened self-interest. So meaning that communications aren't just about their immediate gain and what Greta Thunberg wants, but it's also considering the wider community and how their strategy is impacting that as well. This is within reason. Ethical considerations are complex but often contradictory, and the risk remains, as Becker argues, that urgent persuasion shouldn't come at the cost of other people's well-being, and especially here with kids on the front line. So to wrap things up, what does it tell us? What does SS4C show us about GG communications? It shows that comms are purposeful, layered, ethically complex. Strategies blend macro threats, grassroots networks, and micro actions, and in this context to force climate conversation into the news cycle and getting to kind of challenge who defines the reality. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this gave a little bit of insight into School Strike for Climate and strategic communications, and